Okay, well, Brian, just tell us about yourself and your background, where you're from, and all that.
I don't know. I suppose for me it's very unremarkable. I was born in '87 and grew up in South Belfast. It didn't feel like it was just normal, but it was pretty comfortable upbringing. So I was very lucky. It's privileged, the right word? I'm not sure. Very middle class area, mixed area. I'm sorry to have to. It's awful that we still have to talk like this, but it is what it is, and we live in a divided society. But we had Catholic neighbours. It wasn't an issue. It wasn't spoken of an issue. The only difference I realised was that we both didn't go to our local school. It was 100 metres away, which was odd. Apart from that, totally normal. Went to school at the city centre. A big thing in my childhood was rugby, especially, and then watching the Five Nations on a Saturday afternoon with my dad. That was huge for me, and I love Keith Wood and the Claw, Victor Costello, all these big Southern men. Loved my rugby. Had big aspirations to play for Ulster and Ireland. Never came to be. Did well at school too. I was very good at art, but wasn't allowed to do art. Did well at GCSE and A level. A lot of my friends went to England, Scotland. I was a bit more sheltered. I don't know. I wasn't ready for it. I went to Queen's, played a bit more rugby. Now I'm 33 and I'm a self-employed artist, and I ditched the law after studying for about 5 or 6 years.
And just a wider question I wanted to ask you before we drill into specifics. You stayed at home, and what do you like about Northern Ireland and being, if you like, Northern Irish?
Funny, I'm sitting in Belfast city centre above an auction house, and there's a big team of people here, and there was a young girl, she's 24, and she was working here, and then she all of a sudden just overnight moved up and went back to Glasgow. She's from Belfast but studied in Glasgow, and then she moved back to Glasgow, and then all of a sudden she came back, and I remember thinking, I know exactly what's happened. She's gone over there because she thinks Belfast's inadequate. Belfast got a bad rep. When you're on social media and when you're catch up with old friends, it's not cool to say, "Oh, I'm Belfast." Like a street cred, image problem, what have you. And I got speaking to her, and she said it was exactly that. And as soon as she got her new job in Glasgow, working at a bank, she realised, looking beyond the PR and image problem, I like Belfast. I was happy there. And the exact same thing happened to me about 70 years ago when I tried to live in London for a while and work. For me, there's like a gravitational pull. I just want to be here. I don't know, it's all I've ever known. My grandfather's a shopkeeper in Great Victoria Street, so I just feel very in tune with this place. So last night my wife was actually, she was complaining because she was wanting to look there's a comedian, I can't remember his name. Anyway, he was on BBC Northern Ireland, and she was frantically scrolling through and his iPlayer, and I noticed there's like the Ask Gaeilge section, and there's the Ulster Scott section. And I didn't say anything to her. I was like, all right, because I don't really use iPlayer that much, and I was like, that's it. Everything in Northern Ireland is meticulously scaffolded and policed with laws and statutes and regulations and duties and monies that ensure that both traditions are acknowledged and respected. So you have Irish section, and then you have the Ulster Scots, and they're both there, both visible and accessible. Another example would be the Ulster Museum. You go in, there's the Irish Proclamation. Might offend someone. Oh, but there's the Ulster Covenant. Vice versa, you go in and see the Ulster Covenant. That's offensive. I don't know, offensive, whatever. And then, but there's Irish Proclamation. So it's two traditions in history side by side. And I think, while that's not, obviously there's still always disputes about history and whatnot, at least when it comes to any sort of public monies or any public bodies, there is this legislation and statutory duty to respect both traditions. Whereas what I came to realise through being down south, as whilst a unionist, so unfortunately we live in a world now where being a unionist and Irish are opposites, where it didn't always used to be that. Whereas I would say I'm extremely Irish. I started to notice that there was a certain unrestrained sort of sense of identity. Whereas if I went to Queen's and we knew guys who went to Catholic grammar school, there wasn't any hostility. There was a knowledge of difference. and there was always jokes about, oh, we'll get a cross community grant for this, haha. Whereas I noticed if you met dudes from down south, they didn't have that worldview. It was just their unrestrained culture and history, and there didn't have to be any. Whilst they knew there was a difference, it wasn't. I don't think there's any. I think they're 20 years too late. I think you can't. I think the formulation I'm trying to come up with, you can't be against partition, but partition the unionist worldview. That would be my understanding. You know, you can't have a state with all its television, museums, sports that are rather unrestrained in their narrative, which is based strongly on being anti something. You know, for example, there's a recent article in the Irish Times looking at the Sinn Féin group and the sort of toxic, venomous language that flowed through that. I'd look at Instagram and I'd look at Facebook, and I see these accounts like Ireland Simpsons fan, and just the use of language and the imagery. You know, just for example, like, you know, the Simpsons did a joke about a British chip shop thing being bombed or something, and it wasn't, obviously it was, I'd never seen it, I've seen every episode, obviously it was banned in the UK and Ireland, I guess, but they gleefully put that on and talked about it, and the use of the words like tan and pseudo Brits and horrible pseudo Brits and all this, that, and the other, and TikTok's done reports, Vice done a report about this, just casual use of up the ra, which to me, I find that just harrowing. Or I never experienced IRA bombs, or what do you call it, bomb scares, much mom used to always talk about. But that's horrible. It's like hearing a blackboard thing, whereas it just seems to be very, very normal. You know what, these footballers that keep getting caught out, and these sporting teams keep sending these young people singing "Ooh, up the ra," the Fela and whatnot. There's a casualness to it, and a sort of weird mainstreaming that, if anything, seems to be going up. I'm from here, and I cherish my link with the neighbours across the sea. So if a culture from sporting bodies to museums, TV documentaries, telehistory that is antithetical, or sort of, if not mildly antagonistic, very antagonistic, yeah, I don't think that's right. You know, if you look at England, just the lengths they go to accommodate the full spectrum of their, you know, when post Black Lives Matter, the amount that they do to accommodate all the cultures, shades and ranges of people. And we're in this weird world. It's a bit like Sinn Féin, you know, where they're sort of eulogizing the past, but at the same time hyper progressive on like gender queer stuff, but then also like talking about like James Connolly and stuff.
So, you said you're stressing rather that you're not an imperialist or a planter, but are you made to feel like one increasingly?
Oh, absolutely. Like, you know, I said on Ireland Simpsons fans, you know, I just said, lads, what is going on here? You can't use the term hun. I would never use the term taig. And he just goes, more or less, taig, fenian, those are imperial terms. Hun is a term of fighting off the oppressor or whatever, so it's fine. I just, as I said, it's the unionist cultural figures or whatever. There's I can't really. It's hard. It's honestly hard to make a read of it. But just, you always hear in the background that young loyalist men are seething or whatnot. I can't really speak on that. All I can be is more like a helpful critic and saying, like, I don't think you're doing the groundwork. Even if there's a 50+1 or 50+ or a 70% vote for it, the way in which things, the background noise is very unhelpful, I think. It's basically my way of saying it.